Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Liz, your host here at Crimes Untold. And today we're going to be talking about a dude that killed people he liked or loved. We're going to talk about Eugene Walter Barrett. He was a serial killer of his love interests and a very, very intriguing man. So Eugene Barrett was known to kill 3 women in which he had a romantic relationship with, or thought to have had a romantic relationship with. So these ranged from 1959 to 1995. No, I'm not kidding. He was known for his excessive drinking, and due to this, he would be dishonorably discharged from the army after he fought in the Korean War, or the Korean conflict, as many might say. So this wouldn't deter him from going back to Honolulu, Hawaii, which is where he was living prior to going into the army, to enjoy other parts of his life, which would be women. And soon after he landed, he started dating a divorced mom. Her name was Annie E. Phillips. She was a divorced mother of 5, but it would be short-lived because she didn't want anything to do with his excessive drinking, and he didn't have a job. So Annie would break things off with him in 1959. However, this man was not a fan of that. Oh no. Oh no, no, no. So one night after they broke up, he grabs a gun, picks up a gun, and he heads over to her apartment complex where she lived in the Mayor Wright homes, and he broke in. And he would proceed to startle her. She was on the ground tending to her youngest child, and when she turned, he literally shot her point blank and killed her. Killed her instantly. She had no time to react whatsoever. Thankfully, her neighbors heard what happened and they were able to subdue him until the police arrived. So it's during his trial that he blamed it on being in a drunken stupor, and he could not remember any of his actions or anything. But he did try to refute what witnesses said, um, by saying that, like, they didn't hear what they heard, even though one witness said they knew exactly who it was that did it and heard him say she deserved it. Nice man, right? You just killed your ex-girlfriend. So he was found guilty and sentenced to 15 to 20 years in prison, but for some ungodly reason, his sentence was reduced down to 8 years. I know. Resist your eye rolls, people. Resist your eye rolls. After he served his time, he returned back to Honolulu, where he briefly would marry a woman named Roberta Aviero, and drinking, unfortunately, would be the reason for their divorce. Their marriage was between 1971 and 1972. But his crimes would only intensify. So after they divorced, he would go to the hotel in which Roberta was staying at, and he would be clad with a kitchen knife, and he would break into the room she was in and proceed to stab her to death repeatedly. He would soon be arrested again, but in order to avoid first-degree murder, he waived his right to a trial, and he took the manslaughter 1 reduced sentence, in which he got 10 years. So it's smart for him to do that, but it's bad for us because he was paroled after just 4 years. And anything parole related to the case would be dismissed in 1982. Because once you're paroled, you have parole regulations you have to follow. And then after a certain point of time, which would be the end of your actual prison term, they would be over. So his next victim would be Denisha Castor, or Denisha Kastner, who went by Roxanne. So Roxanne lived across from him with her son Ethan occasionally. So I say that occasionally because she lost custody of him due to her issue with substance abuse and sexual abuse, which sounds really bad. He was allowed to be over at her apartment during the day, kind of like visitation, but then he would have to go back to where he was living. The relations between Roxanne and this lovely man, Mr. Barrett, it's kind of weird because there's nothing known definitively about him and her having relations, other than the fact that they were neighbors. So where they lived in the apartment buildings, he was here and she was across the street. So they literally could like see each other. Um, but due to his crime, it would make it seem like there was something that happened between them. So apparently, it's known by her friends that he could have possibly harmed her, uh, due to her calling her friends and telling them that she was literally petrified of this man. And ultimately, because of this phone call, other phone calls were made, and Mr. Barrett would be put into Queens Medical Center in August, until August of 1995 for psychiatric treatment, which is when he would be released. So, now just days after he's released, days, this is on August 11th of 1995. He would go out and drink with a friend, and his brother would be with them. And now, when he was out, or when he needed to get more alcohol or beer, he would go to a store. Now, when he's on his way, he sees Roxanne going into her apartment. And I'm sure most of you have alarm bells going off right now. He then would redirect himself to go back to his apartment and get his semi-automatic 25 caliber pistol and go to her apartment. Um, her son Ethan is playing outside in front of her apartment. He walks right by him, so Ethan sees him. Now, when Barrett walks by, he goes straight into her apartment, and he would then proceed to her room, which, if he knows exactly where her room is, then he's been there quite a few times. So he goes to her room. This is where everything takes a turn. As soon as she turns to face him, he proceeds to shoot her twice in the head. And then he just leaves the apartment, walks right by Ethan, goes back home. So because Ethan saw him with a gun and going in and leaving the apartment, he's the eyewitness that puts him at the scene. So Ethan then calls his dad, and his dad is the one that calls 911. So Roxanne would go on to die at Queens Medical Center later that day. Barrett would be arrested yet again, and he would rant that he wished that he stayed in jail until his problem was dealt with, which his problem he's talking about is his violent tendencies against women. So when trial came around, there was no way of refuting his rage towards women, and he was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. So he at first was in a prison in Oklahoma, but later in life, in 2003, he would return to Hawaii and would be housed in the Halawa Correctional Facility. This would be his last year in Hawaii because he died on November 8th of 2003. So that, my friends, is Mr. Eugene Barrett, the man that liked to kill his love interests. If you learned something from this, cool. If not, I hope you guys or just enjoyed me telling you about him, and his 3 crazy murders and him continuously getting out of jail. But I'll see you guys tomorrow in my next one about Lynn Turner.